The night began with a silence, so heavy it felt like the earth itself was holding its breath. A silence before a storm. A silence that hides the weight of secrets long buried. Elias knew that silence well. He lived inside it. For years, he had walked through corridors filled with voices that never addressed him, faces that never looked his way, and eyes that skimmed over him as though he was nothing more than a shadow. To most, he was a man of no importance, just the janitor in a place where power and ambition roared louder than humanity. A ministry of dominion towered above the city, a fortress of stone and steel where men and women in fine suits argued about the fate of millions. Elias cleaned their floors. He carried their trash. He repaired the pipes they never saw leaking, the wires they never noticed sparking, the locks they never thought could fail. And he did it all without thanks, without acknowledgement, without a single soul asking who he was or how he had ended up here. But Elias had once been something else. He had once held knowledge that could tear down empires and build them again. He had once shaped forces no ordinary mind could even comprehend. But that was a lifetime ago, before betrayal turned him into a ghost walking among the powerful, hiding his skill beneath calloused hands and weary silence. Tonight, however, silence would not protect him. Because tonight, the walls of the ministry trembled. Minister Aldrich sat in his grand chamber, the most feared and respected man in the capital. His voice could declare war. His signature could strip entire families of their homes. His command could silence dissent in a single night. He wore arrogance like a crown, and few dared to stand within his presence without bowing. He despised weakness, and in his eyes, Elias was weakness incarnate. More than once, Aldrich had ordered him around like a servant, degrading him with words dipped in venom. "Clean faster, old man. You think dust waits for your fragile bones? Or worse, people like you are lucky we even allow you in this building. A relic of wasted years." Elias never responded. He only bowed his head, hiding the flame of rage and sorrow beneath a mask of obedience. But fate is cruel, and it finds ways to humiliate the proud. The storm that had waited outside finally struck. A tremor shook the chamber. Lights flickered, and the hum of machines deep within the ministry broke into static screams. Screams of systems failing, of something terrible awakening. The very heart of the dominion, the vault of control, had been breached. No one believed it possible. The vault was guarded by layers of security designed by the brightest engineers, the most cunning minds. It was the core that held every network, every secret, every surveillance string that allowed Aldrich to rule with an iron grip. And yet, as alarms wailed through the building, as red light bathed the chamber, it was clear. The unthinkable had happened. Panic erupted. Advisors ran in circles, shouting orders that no one followed. Guards stormed the hallways with weapons drawn, but their eyes betrayed their fear. Aldrich slammed his fists on the table, shouting for answers. None came. Not until Elias appeared at the threshold, silent as ever, holding his mop in one hand, as though the chaos meant nothing. "You!" Aldrich spat, his voice like thunder. "What are you doing here? Get out before I have you dragged by your neck." But Elias didn't move. He simply watched the panic, the flashing lights, the chaos. His eyes, for the first time in years, glimmered with something more than weariness. He knew exactly what was happening. The vault wasn't just breached, it was collapsing. And if it collapsed, the entire dominion would fall with it. Every city, every system, every life tethered to its control would descend into chaos. And no one in this room, none of the powerful minds, none of the arrogant elites, had the faintest idea how to stop it. Elias did. The sound of the alarms pierced deeper, an endless pulse that reminded Elias of another night, long ago, when everything he had built was stolen from him. A night when his genius had been claimed by men who had names like Aldrich. Men who used him, then discarded him when he no longer served their ambition. The irony twisted in his chest like a knife. They had stolen his work, and now only he could save it. He dropped the mop. The wooden handle cracked against the floor like a signal no one understood. "I can stop it," he said, his voice steady, low, almost drowned by the alarms. The entire chamber fell silent. Every face turned to him with disbelief. Some sneered. Some laughed nervously. But Aldridge's expression was darker suspicion, anger, and something else. Fear. "You?" The minister spat, rising to his full height. "A janitor claims he can mend what the greatest minds of the Dominion cannot? Do you mock me, old fool?" Elias met his gaze for the first time in years. And in that gaze there was no fear. "I don't mock you," he whispered. "I created it," the chamber gasped. The words hit like a blade to the throat. Even Aldridge faltered, though he tried to mask it with rage. Lies, he wanted to scream, but a shadow of recognition flickered in his eyes. Somewhere, deep in the archives of his memory, he recalled stories of a man who had once designed systems too advanced for any ordinary mind. A man erased from history, struck from records, left to rot in silence. Elias. "You dare." Aldridge began, but his words were swallowed by another tremor. The floor quaked. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The vault was unraveling faster now. Elias stepped forward, past guards who did not know whether to stop him or let him through, past advisors who looked at him now with a mix of terror and desperate hope. For the first time in years, the invisible man was seen, and with every step, the weight of his hidden past pressed heavier on his soul. He remembered the betrayal, the way they had taken his blueprints, his algorithms, his blood-soaked nights of work, and declared them their own. He remembered the promises of recognition that turned into chains of servitude, and he remembered the silence he had chosen to protect himself, to survive, to bury the fire that once burned in him. But the fire was back. "I will stop it," Elias said again, louder this time. His voice echoed against the walls, rising above the alarms. "But when I do, you will hear the truth you buried." Aldridge glared, jaw clenched, but he said nothing. He could not afford to say no. The Dominion itself hung on the word of the man he had humiliated. Elias walked toward the door that led to the vault. Each step was a defiance. Each step was a resurrection. And as the door sealed behind him, leaving the powerful trembling in their chamber, Elias whispered to himself the truth he had hidden all along. "They thought they erased me, but they only sharpened me." Inside the vault, the air was alive with static, buzzing with fury. Systems screamed in dying pulses. The networks writhed like serpents tearing themselves apart. And Elias, calm, unshaken, placed his hands on the console he had built with his own blood years ago. It recognized him. A surge of data exploded across the screens, symbols no one else could read. To others, it was chaos. To him, it was language. His language. The machine had called for its maker, and he had finally answered. But as his fingers flew across the console, as the storm of code bent to his will, a shadow loomed in his mind. For saving the Dominion meant saving Aldridge, saving the very man who had destroyed his life. Could he do it? Could he bring order back to the hands of the tyrant who had stripped him of everything? Or was this his chance to let it all burn? The alarms wailed louder. The walls shook harder. Outside, he knew they waited for his decision, powerless, afraid, desperate. And inside, Elias stood between vengeance and salvation, between the silence of his past and the roar of his truth. He closed his eyes and chose. The choice set fire to everything inside him. His heart raced. His breath sharpened. His mind became a battlefield of rage and clarity. And just as his decision took shape, just as his hands carved the path that would change everything, the door behind him hissed open. Footsteps entered, and a voice familiar, venomous, cut through the chaos. "You will not decide the fate of my dominion without me." It was Aldrich. He had come into the lion's den, and Elias turned, his eyes blazing, ready to speak the words he had buried for decades. Aldrich stood in the trembling chamber of the vault, his breath ragged from the smoke and static that filled the air. He had always seen himself as untouchable, a man above storms, but now his authority felt fragile in the presence of the janitor he had scorned for years. Elias did not bow. For the first time, he met the minister's gaze with fire that could not be hidden. His hands hovered over the console, streams of data rushing beneath his fingers like rivers of lightning. "You shouldn't be here," Elias said, his tone low, steady, dangerous. "This room recognizes only one master, and it's not you." Aldrich's lips curled into a snarl. "You think a machine will turn against me? I am the Dominion. Everything in this building, everything in this city, exists by my command." "No," Elias whispered, his voice breaking through the chaos like a blade. "It exists because of me. You've built your empire on bones you never bothered to see. My bones, my work, my sacrifice." The words struck deeper than any explosion. Aldrich faltered, but pride would not let him bend. He took a step closer, his shadow stretching toward Elias, though the quaking walls betrayed his fear. "You claim you created this," the minister spat. "If that is true, then you are guilty of every atrocity this system has committed under my reign. Every chain, every death. Do you deny your blood is on those hands of yours?" Elias froze. The accusation was poison, but also truth. He had once dreamed of progress, of order, of a structure to lift humanity from chaos. He had believed the vault would serve justice, equality, balance. But men like Aldrich had twisted it, transforming his creation into a tool of surveillance, oppression, and fear. He bore that weight every day he walked unseen through the halls, pretending to be less than he was. "I carry that guilt," Elias admitted, his voice hoarse but firm. "But I also carry the power to end it. You took my work, Aldrich, but you never understood it. You never could. And now you face what only I can stop." The minister's face burned red with fury. "Then stop it, if you dare. Save what you built. Or are you only a coward who hides behind a mop and forgotten titles?" Elias's eyes narrowed. The machine pulsed, waiting for his command. The air felt like the edge of a cliff. One choice would mean salvation, the other ruin. "I will stop it," Elias said, his chest tightening. "But not for you." His fingers moved again, faster, sharper, carving through the chaos of the failing systems. Every stroke was a memory nights alone with equations no one understood. Mornings spent bleeding into blueprints, years stolen from him by betrayal. Now all of it returned, alive in his hands, alive in his mind. The vault responded. Walls of code bent, corrupted circuits surrendered. The collapse slowed, groaning like a beast tamed under its master's hand. For a moment, silence returned, but this silence was different. It was the silence of awe, of impossible survival. Behind him, Aldrich breathed heavily, his eyes wide as he witnessed the truth he had long buried. The janitor was no servant. He was the architect. But Aldrich could not admit defeat. Pride was his last weapon. "You've proven yourself useful," he said, forcing his voice into cold authority. "Perhaps there is a place for you after all, not as a janitor, as something higher. A servant close to my side." Elias froze. Then, slowly, he turned, his eyes filled with something that chilled the minister's blood. "I was never your servant," Elias said. "I was your shadow. And shadows remember everything." The machine groaned again. A final sequence awaited him, one command that would either stabilize the Dominion forever or tear it apart beyond repair. Elias looked at Aldrich. He thought of every insult, every humiliation, every night cleaning the boots of the powerful who spat at his name. He thought of the lives crushed beneath the system, the cries that never reached the ears of the ruling class. And he thought of himself, how he had allowed silence to bury him alive. Now he held the power to decide if silence would reign again. Aldrich stepped closer, his voice trembling with desperation beneath his rage. "Save it, Elias. Do it. And I will rewrite your place in history. I will give you recognition, power, wealth." Recognition? Elias interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. "You erased me. You took everything. You forced me into invisibility, and now you offer me scraps?" His hand hovered over the final command. The machine throbbed with anticipation. "History doesn't need your permission anymore, Aldrich," Elias whispered. "I will write it myself." The console flared. The vault screamed. And in that instant, Elias made his choice. The system stabilized, not for Aldrich, not for the Dominion, but for the people beyond these walls. For the millions who did not even know his name, but deserved to live free from collapse. The Dominion would survive tonight, but not unchanged, because Elias left a mark. A seed of code, hidden deep within the heart of the machine. A whisper of rebellion that would grow like fire beneath the surface. A key only he could wield. He turned from the console, his chest heavy, but his spirit unbroken. "It's done," he said. Aldrich's face twisted, torn between relief and fury. "You saved my Dominion. You obeyed me after all." Elias stepped forward, his eyes unflinching. "No, I saved the people you would have doomed. The Dominion belongs to them now, whether you see it or not." Aldrich raised his hand, trembling with rage, as though to strike him. But the weight of truth crushed him. He lowered it slowly, his breath uneven. For the first time, the Minister of Dominion stood in silence before the man he had called invisible. The two men stared at each other, one trembling with the collapse of his pride, the other rising from the ashes of his silence. Elias turned his back and walked toward the door. His footsteps were steady, deliberate, echoing louder than the alarms had. At the threshold, he paused. His words were low, but they filled the chamber like thunder. "You will remember this night, Aldrich. You will remember that the man you spat on held your empire in his hands. And you will live knowing I chose to let you breathe when I could have watched you choke." And with that, Elias stepped into the hallway, leaving the minister in the shadows of his crumbling power. Outside the vault, the advisors and guards looked at him differently now. Their eyes no longer skimmed over him as though he were air. They watched him with awe, with fear, with questions they dared not ask. Elias ignored them all. He did not want their reverence, nor their gratitude. What he carried was heavier than either. As he walked, he whispered to himself, a truth carved from pain and revelation. Invisibility is a curse, but it is also armor. And in silence, I learned what the powerful never will, that a shadow can outlast any crown. That night, the Dominion stood. The machines calmed. The city slept, never knowing how close it had come to collapse. But beneath its foundations, a seed waited. A seed planted by the forgotten, watered by rage, destined to bloom when the world least expected it. Elias had become more than a man. He had become a ghost in the heart of power, a whisper in the system. And whispers, once awakened, never die. Final reflection. Every empire believes it will last forever. Every ruler believes their voice will echo beyond death. But history is not written by the crowns, nor by the armies, nor by the ministers who command obedience. It is written in silence, in the shadows where forgotten men and women endure, in the whispers of those who refuse to die invisible. And when the world least expects it, those whispers rise. They rise like storms. They rise like Elias. They rise like us all.